Hi and welcome to MTG CubeTube. I'm Sjoerd Willems and I have a cube that I'd like to play and talk about. In these videos I will try to say things about cube that are hopefully either useful or entertaining for cube enthusiasts out there. Sometimes I'll talk about my own cube just because that's my best reference point, but I believe most of the takeaways will apply to other cubes as well. There's really a huge variety of cubes out there, and if you don't believe that, you should check out cubetutor.com, which is an excellent website where lots of cube owners manage their list. Mine is also on there. When a new set comes out, I like changing a lot of cards in the cube at once to sort of celebrate the new set for a few sessions. After that, the cube will revert back to normal, but some of the new cards will stay in. Guilds of Ravnica is a great set for this, and it's been a fun exercise to transform the cube into one that focuses a bit more heavily on the 5 highlighted guilds. I have added 38 different cards from Guilds of Ravnica and have enjoyed almost all of them. Last episode I went through the first 4 guilds, and today I will discuss Golgari and the monocolor cards from Guilds of Ravnica. But before we dive in, I want to introduce a new segment reminiscent of Crack a Pack from the Limited Resources podcast, Crack a Cube. As I mentioned, on cubetutor.com you can find loads of different cubes and you can even draft them. For Crack a Cube, I will select a random cube on CubeTutor, start a draft and make 2 or 3 picks. So here we have a cube called Danny's Cube. Thanks Danny for putting up your cube. We have a pack without any red cards. There is a recurring Nightmare, that's one of my favorite magic cards of all time. Also I love Graveyard Recursion, and recurring Nightmare is very fun. And there's even 2 cards that go well with it, Jiral's Messenger and the Mere Battlesphere. And I don't know if you've noticed, but there's 3 Jaces in this pack. Wow. So I think I would take Recurring Nightmare over Jace the Mind Sculptor because it's probably equally powerful but a lot more fun. In the second pack there's Liliana of the Veil, that goes really well with Recurring Nightmare. What else? Thawing Glaciers is a land that lets you, in a very slow way, find all the lands in your deck and put them into play one by one. But I think Liliana of the Veil is an easy pick here. And, well, in the third pack we get Demonic Tutor. So that went well. Thanks again Danny, and next episode we'll crack another random cube. So now let's have a look at the Guilds of Ravnica cube editions for Golgari. Assassin's Trophy is probably the best card in the set overall for Constructed, and is an easy include for cube as well because flexible answers are great to have for whatever brokenness people are trying to assemble. Vraska is almost a generic planeswalker that pluses to draw and minuses to destroy something, but because she's 4 mana, she breaks the mold of all the 5 mana ones that do a similar trick. And what I did for the cube is just replace the 6 mana Vraska for this one to just try her out. In the cube with sacrifice synergies, her +1 becomes a lot better, but even without that she felt pretty strong. I added Underrealm Lich mainly because it's a flashy mythic and it was sitting in my binder doing nothing, and sometimes that's as good as a reason as any to give a card a world in cube. Lich enables graveyard synergies, but slowly, is hard to kill, but actually not that hard, and gives you some card selection, but in such a way that you can easily end up running yourself out of cards. I feel like all of that combined with just the 4/3 body still doesn't make it worth 5 mana. But I guess not all cards have to be optimally efficient. Find Finality is a nice combination of card advantage, spell and sweeper, but given that there are quite a few archetypes that don't care about either half very much, it's not as flexible a card as it seems. Against aggro, burn, combo and control, both halves can feel a bit clunky, so I don't think this card will be long for the cube. Golgari Finebroker is just a great value card, and combined with cards like Recurring Nightmare that we just saw and Birthing Pod, it even becomes a great engine piece. Well, that is all for Golgari. Now let's have a look at the monocolored cards. Nullhide Ferox is kind of big and dumb, but it is a great foil to things like Liliana of the Veil and Hymn to Turak, and it seemed a reasonable thing to replace a card like Thrun the Last Troll with. Pelt Collector is mainly good when you have some sort of Elves Tribal or Green Aggro in your cube. I have neither, and Pelt Collector has been unimpressive as a result. Red aggro often functions as a fun police in Cube in that it can be a pretty consistent deck with a fast clock that keeps in check how slow or how greedy or how single-mindedly focused on some unfair way to win the other decks can be. Because of that, I like having aggressive 2-drops for red. Sadly, many of the best ones cost double red and are almost only good in such a mono red deck. Runaway Steamkin doesn't cost double red, but because it only grows on red spells, you still want to play mainly red cards in your deck. However, because of its ability to also generate mana, mono red aggro is not the only deck that might want this. A deck that has some more mid-range red cards to ramp out, or even decks with some sort of expensive high-end or combo finish, could play Steamkin and then be reasonably happy with it. Long story short, Runaway Steamkin is great. Risk Factor is another great card for red aggro or burn, and this one is also very playable in 2-color red decks as long as the plan is to pressure the opponent. The gameplay with this is interesting, the card can support multiple different strategies and is likely one that I'll keep in the cube. Although I've never really been an aggro player, Goblin Rebel Master and Legion Warboss are 2 cards that I very much enjoy playing with. Casting one of these can turn you into the aggro player, even if that's not your primary game plan. With just one card, you're suddenly putting a lot of pressure on your opponent or their planeswalkers, and if they don't have an answer, one of these can just win the game on their own. Legion Warboss is yet another card from Guilds that is great in an aggressive deck, but that can also be good in mid-range or even controlling decks. Guilds of Ravnica is just full of great red cards for Cube. Arclight Phoenix is another great addition. It's mainly good in mono red or blue red spells, and it combos very well with any looting effect, especially faithless looting. The gameplay with this is fun as well, and I'm really a fan. As mentioned before with Assassin's Trophy and Knight of Autumn, I love having flexible answers in Cube. Goblin Crater Maker can just be a 2/2 attacker, but having the flexibility of killing any small utility creature or even some massive colorless threats like Karn or even Emrakul make it a great addition. Experimental Frenzy is nice because it adds a new dimension to the gameplay of red aggressive decks. Going off with this by casting multiple spells from the top of your deck is a great feeling, and it can give aggressive decks that include red some oft-needed staying power. Dream Eater is alright, but it doesn't compare to some Cube mainstay blue 6-drops like Frost Titan, Consecrated Sphinx and Torrential Gearhulk. Replacing one of those with Dream Eater can be good though, especially if the power level of blue needs lowering a bit. I like Mission Breathing. It's not a super strong card and it's definitely worse than Snapcaster Mage in most cases, but it offers a similar flexibility and has been very fun to play with. Big flying demons are a thing that Black does, and it feels right to have some of them in the cube. There are quite a few options to choose from, and they come mainly in 2 flavors. 1, slightly undercosted but with a drawback, or 2, slightly overcosted but with some beneficial effect. I like how Doom Whisperer presents the best of both worlds. 5 mana feels very reasonable for a big flyer, and the Surveil ability is real upside, especially if your deck has use for things in the graveyard. Price of Fame is just a card I added because I wanted a lot of cards from Guilds of Ravnica in the cube. It's often worse than the 2 mana versions like Doomblade and Ultimate Price, but the fact that it's unconditional and has a nice Surveil bonus makes it a fine option. The number of black instant removal spells that can be considered for cube is just huge, and basically any combination of them is fine. But there is something to say for having maybe a more diverse assortment, over just the ones that seem the most powerful. Bounty Agent is White's Goblin Crater Maker, in that it's just a replaceable 2/2 for 2, until it suddenly trades up for something great on the other side of the board. In my cube it doesn't do that very often, so I haven't been very impressed, but in a cube full of legendary creatures she can be great. Conclave Tribunal was an easy card to add to the cube. White has a lot of these effects, and I would guess that most cubes have some number of them already, and replacing an Oblivion Ring or Banishing Light with this almost feels like a no-brainer, just because it's very similar, yet a bit more interesting. When I went through the cube to see if March of the Multitudes had enough support, I noticed how many cards already make tokens without me having put any effort in including a well fleshed out token theme. When I realized that, Divine Visitation seemed a sweet build around to add, especially after adding some extra token makers to help the Celestia strategy out. It's the type of card that will sometimes end up being the last card in the pack, but if there's a player that wants it, can lead to great success stories. I added Venerated Loxodon to help out White Weenie and to be yet another card that worked well in a Celestia or Boros tokens deck. I haven't really seen it in action yet, but I think it's a good card to have around to help out these strategies. And those were all the Guilds of Ravnica cards that I deemed worthy for Cube. If there are any cards that I have overlooked and that you think are great additions, please let me know in the comments. For now, I will end with this episode's Deck of the Week that showcases nicely some red cards from Guilds of Ravnica that I was raving about earlier, with 2 splashes that were made easy by the extra mana fixing that I added to allow more room for the 5 guilds to shine. The deck has a good curve with some of the best 1 and 2 drops, including Runaway Steamkin, some more expensive threats that can take over the game all on their own, including Legion Warboss and Aurelia Exemplar of Justice, some burn spells, and some cards that provide the necessary inevitability. The mana is pretty good with some fetches, the right shock lands, Horizon Canopy as the only non-red land, and the mighty Sol Ring to make for extremely busted starts. Think turn 1 Smuggler's Copter into turn 2 Bloodbraid Elf into Legion Warboss. All in all, a pretty strong deck in which the Guilds of Ravnica cards felt right at home. And that concludes this episode. Thanks again for watching, and please like and subscribe if you want to see more like this.